And I want to go to Dr. Steve Pieczenik because, he was the head of psychological warfare and hostage negotiations. He helped do the Camp David Accords, one of the most famous negotiations ever, the only successful real Middle East peace until the assassination of the leader of Egypt. And, of course, he was one of the founders of Delta Force with General Boykin and been involved in a lot of black ops and been involved in overthrowing governments, if you're a new listener. He is here now with us, Dr. Steve Pieczenik. And I want to get, because back when all this happened, he said basically they took him out. It was a stand down. Same deal. Let's move on. That's what Colonel Schaefer said. That's what all my other sources have said. Now it's all been confirmed. A, what really happened in Benghazi in hindsight? B, where is this going? How big is it? And is Cheney running defense for Obama, saying, oh, they dropped the ball, they're idiots, they should get in trouble? It didn't look like to me they dropped the ball. Or was it a false flag against the White House by another internal group, but then the White House couldn't have done that because they were in control? I mean, they weren't all just sleeping. So, Dr. Pieczenik, what do you think really happened?
Well, it's what I said a long time, Alex. It's a pleasure always to be on. It's basically a palace coup. This was an attempt by John Brennan, who illegally used what was called a paramilitary SOCOM command, that Southern Command, soldiers that were offline. Offline meaning that it was not authorized through the DCI, Directed Central Intelligence Agency, who was General Petraeus. It was an attempt to get General Petraeus out when we said to you, and I said a long time ago to your audience, there is a war going on between the civilian CIA and the military intelligence General Petraeus was put in order to control the civilian CIA. He could not do that. They want to get rid of him. General Petraeus had wanted to arm the Syrian guards. However, he did not know about this entirely illegal organization that was authorized directly by the President of the United States to run an illegal covert operation. In other words, that put Obama in line of impeachment through John Brennan, who was not an authorized elected official, but an appointed one who had worked for Bush Jr., who ran an illegal SOCOM unit in a unit that was called the embassy but was not, where they tortured al-Qaeda prisoners and used it as a transfer point for the armament. And I said it a long time ago. And at that point, there was a stand-down issue. There were military generals, AFRICOM, General Ham, who wanted to go in. He was told to stand down. He stood down. A rear admiral, who I told you the 7th Fleet, was told to stand down. He stood down. And then 14 other Navy officers were decommissioned. And the DCM of the embassy, who correctly said this is the first time Foreign Service officers had more balls than the military. I am ashamed of what the military did not do. This was an illegal act. The president should have been impeached. This is not just a small cover-up. This has nothing to do with Republicans, Democrats, or security operatives. I happen to know all the individuals exceedingly well. Let's go through a board that oversaw.
By the way, let me just stop you briefly for people to understand.
And with me. And Tom has had an impeccable reputation, but he's a company man, and he lied. On that board, he lied. He knew very well this was an illegal operation. This was an operation to cover Obama, and Hillary Clinton was directly responsible for what went on because that consular officer had nothing to do but keep the consulate intact. It had nothing to do with regional security officers. And in fact, the regional security officer who testified in front of the Senate was correct. This is not about more regional security officers. This is about better capability. And the CIA destroyed Petraeus. Petraeus was furious. And at the same time, our friend, again, Mueller, who illegally leaked out a lot of this information, got rid of Petraeus, and the military really did not come forth. General Dempsey is to be condemned for this because he had authorized the stand down from President Obama, who now is guilty of being a very inappropriate, incompetent military commander-in-chief. Listen to what I said before. I said before he was an incompetent president who was not qualified to run as president. Now I am accusing him of being an incompetent military commander-in-chief. According to the laws of military law and order, he can be qualified for military tribunal and impeachment for having done what he did, for allowing our men to die in the field of battle. Now, I happen to know the head of the NSA. I know for a fact that Keith Alexander ran 2 UAVs all the time, so they knew exactly what was going on. However, if you look back into the history, General Dempsey lied in the beginning with the Susan Rice story, saying that, in fact, there was this video that went viral, and it was General Dempsey who first said it. He should have been indicted from the moment. I kept saying that for years. He should have been indicted. So who was on the committee? On the committee to evaluate this was Admiral Mullen, again, another incompetent admiral and military officer who gave us the false flag and both the nonsense about SEAL Team 6 killing Osama bin Laden. I told you I knew his father, who had worked for William Morris. So you have incompetent generals who are self-aggrandizing, no longer perform, and have nothing to do with our national security. The Board of Overseers indicts specifically Hillary Clinton must be indicted, and a guy named Patrick Kennedy. Patrick Kennedy worked for me as an assistant administrator under Eagleburger, under Carter, under Reagan, under Bush. He's a very competent, he was a nice guy, but he is lethal because the Undersecretary for Management, as it was brought out by the DCM in the Senate hearings, was absolutely correct. Patrick Kennedy controls both the allocation of resources and controls everything in terms of disposition. Because when I had to go overseas and I had to take out Noriega, and I had to come back to Patrick Kennedy and give my administrative numbers, and I said, I don't have any receipts, and he said, well, what happened? I said, I was being chased, and, my life was in line. He said, well, you got to pay me back in the government. That was Patrick Kennedy, the Uriah Heep of the State Department. He has to be investigated. Pickering has to be investigated. Hillary Clinton. Now, the key element here is Eric Boswell, who was the Secretary of the Assistant Secretary of Diplomatic Security. I've known him since the day of Eagleburger. This is a very straightforward, honorable man who took the sword for Hillary Clinton and Patrick Kennedy. They go back 30 years. And in turn, the two took the lies on behalf of Tom Pickering. So you have a foreign service that did not act appropriately with regards to the DCM, who was on the ground, with regards to an ambassador who was an outstanding ambassador and had nothing to do with the excellent regional security officers. What this was a coup attempt to take out Petraeus, to take out the military from running the CIA and covert operatives that no one knew about and were not even on the books authorized by President Obama, by Biden, Donlan, and all of the...
So it's about covering up a CIA secret army with jihadis and al-Qaeda. It's about covering up a secret al-Qaeda army.
Because the DCI knew about the al-Qaeda. He was running that unit. This was even beyond that, if you can believe double secret probation, Alex. This was the unit that was created way beyond anything to do under the jurisdiction of Petraeus. This was a unit that we call way offline, that had to do with special officers, special forces on contract, which was really off the books. It's so illegal, I can't even tell you. I worked off the books. Once you work offline, you don't get paid, you don't have anything. I've never been paid, but if you're captured, you have no official cover. John Brennan was authorized to do that by the President of the United States.
Was Blackwater involved? Was Blackwater involved? Because I know they were heavily in that area.
I'm sorry?
Did you you came on 2 weeks after it happened and said all this. Same thing you're saying now.
It's all of it. Nobody believed me, but the one who did believe me, besides you, was Rupert Murdoch and the New York Post and Fox. And I'll tell you why. Rupert Murdoch ordered a book called Benghazi Dispatch. And in that dispatch, in a book done by William Morrow, he described it to the detail. So where there were those who picked it up very quickly, like yourself, and you got to give the Fox News the credit as well as you to keep on the story because they wouldn't let it go. And they were correct. This is not just a cover-up. This makes Watergate look like baby stuff. This makes Clinton impeachment look like nothing.
All right, I want you to talk to me like I'm 5.
Criminal offense committed by the President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, and John Brennan, and General Dempsey.
Doc, I got to go to break. I know you have trouble hearing me, but
the price for this.
I got to go to break. I want to come back. I want you to talk to me like I'm 5 years old. I mean, I want you to break down the whole story, why they did it, where you think it's going, because they've been caught. How big is this? I mean, this is incredible. A double-secret al-Qaeda army giving them missiles. This all came out with our guests, Pieczenik especially, but Colonel Schaefer and others. And it was clear. I mean, the al-Qaeda forces knew right where to hit. It was the group they hired for security. Of course, it wasn't a video that did it. And so explain to me slowly, because I know you did it back when it happened, but now with all the new info, why do something this crazy? How did they think they'd blame Petraeus, who you predicted they'd go after before they did a couple of years ago here on the show? You said there was a fight between the civilian CIA and the Pentagon. And then now, where does this go? But explain it to people in just boiled down layman terms, what this compartmentalized group did and why they wanted the ambassador dead, and again, where this goes now.
The real issue, it's very simple, really. You got to think of two elements of the government fighting each other that are covert. The government is never unified. It never has been unified. For over 30 to 40 years, there's always been a conflict between the CIA and the military and the CIA and the FBI. You just saw that conflict of the CIA and the FBI in the Boston Massacre, where there was no sharing of information. The CIA has been run for the past 50 years by civilians who have been out of control. Eisenhower warned us about it in called Legacy of Ashes. He told Alan Dulles, you've got to shut down this CIA. It's creating a disaster. Jimmy Carter tried to get rid of 4,000. Reagan brought them back in. These are guys who are really not trained in very well in either human or in paramilitary units. But what they did was under Panetta, under John Brennan, who was not really an operative but came out of the investigative report, they started to create paramilitary units that infringed on the military. In other words, they started to do drone warfare, which was illegal, and Obama was brought up on that charge. They started to kill thousands of people that were illegal, both in Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan. They started to create a civil war in Pakistan between the Pakistani army, ISI, and the CIA, but they didn't say anything. And our legislators allowed this to happen. In the meantime, Hillary Clinton went around the world in 168 countries, had nothing to do, was totally incompetent, and really was allowing all of this to be run between John Brennan in the White House, who was only appointed. He was not elected. And John Brennan has been there since Bush Jr., since Clinton. So it goes all the way back to Clinton, back to Hillary Clinton. And John Brennan ordered a very secret unit that was never even registered or on the books, which is called offline, off the books, as Hicks said, the DCM. And basically that unit was used to create another counterforce against Petraeus and his CIA and his Al-Qaeda units, which were legally charged with creating arms shipment into Syria. In other words, the legal covert arm that Petraeus was doing was being undermined by a unit that he knew nothing about. He was blindsided purposely by John Brennan, the President of the United States, Obama, and including his Vice President, Biden, and all the people in the White House in order to get rid of Petraeus and the military overseeing of the CIA. And what happened is at the same time that the Benghazi occurred, which was really not even an embassy, it was a consulate unit where they tortured people and terrorists, so-called terrorists, and were shipping guns at the same time. The ambassador happened to be a target of opportunity. He was not really the actual target intended. He was killed on a sideline, as was the DCM, who said it very clearly this was a terrorist attack.
All right, Doc, stay there. We got to go to break. I'm going to go into overdrive for at least 20 minutes here with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. And then after that, your phone calls for folks that have been patient. But this has all come out. This is no longer Pieczenik 7 months ago saying this. It's all confirmed, folks. It's incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now into the fourth hour of Overdrive. Dr. Steve Pieczenik's our guest. And he was breaking down what really happened in Benghazi, and now it's all out in the open. Finish up what you were getting into about what happened there. In the next long segment, I want to get into what the political ramifications of this means, because they're now on the news saying, we listen to everything you do, and we've been recording everything for 10 years. That's just admitting felonies. And they're back on the news going, we do torture, and it's okay. And we're taking $85 million a month from you. And it's like when criminals, I've studied psychopaths, I know you're a psychiatrist, after they've gotten away with like 20 murders, they start getting real reckless. I guess at a subconscious level, they want to be caught. I'll let you, the psychiatrist, explain it to us in the next segment, or tell me if you disagree, but it does seem like they've gone completely insane. And Hillary throwing fits going, what difference does it make? I mean, these people would be a joke if they weren't so dangerous.
You're correct, Alex. The real issue is, and I've said it for years, Hillary Clinton is a very dangerous individual. To say she's a sociopath is undermining. She's really Borgia. I mean, she has evil personification as well as Clinton. This is a very dangerous individual. The fact that she happens to be a woman is irrelevant. The deaths that she has from Foster on otherwise outward is really irrelevant. She should have been indicted and put in prison a long time ago. She was culpable. She's directly culpable because she knew exactly what happened. In order to cover up this palace coup against Petraeus, they used the State Department, and they used the very people whom I knew. In particular, they used a guy by the name of Patrick Kennedy, who worked for me. He's now the Undersecretary for Management. Now, to say an Undersecretary of Management at State is talking about an individual who can manipulate all the funds, all the positions, and all the careers that's involved. So the DCM in Libya was absolutely correct when he said everything, that nobody really questioned him. They tried to keep him quiet, and Patrick Kennedy really tried to threaten. Patrick, I've known since he was a kid. He worked for me. But he's very much of a Uriah Heep and very Machiavellian. You don't get to the top after 30 years unless you really play the system. In turn, his boss was really Tom Pickering, who was asked to be on a committee to oversee this entire lie where Brennan was trying to take out Petraeus, where, in fact, politically we were getting into very serious problems of arms shipment into Syria, which Petraeus had wanted, I was against, Hillary Clinton wanted, I was against, but Brennan undercut everybody at the same time, not because it was for political reasons, it was for personal reasons. So for two reasons at the same time, both an illegal shipment of arms and an illegal undercutting of our own DCI. That's the
sure. How does doing that undermine Petraeus? We know they got rid of him after that. The FBI was illegally spying on him.
Now we get Mueller in here. Now, don't forget, Bob Mueller has also been implicated in the Boston Massacre. Remember what I said? He was the Assistant Attorney General in Massachusetts for counterterrorism. He knew all about the governor, who was one of his law partners. He was in charge of counterterrorism in Massachusetts. He knew exactly where the CIA had come in. He knew exactly that the Russians had asked the CIA repeatedly as to where it is. So Mueller, once again, is involved in undercutting one of our operatives, in other words, the director of the FBI. So again, you have these criminals who are continuously overseeing so-called national security. That's Obama, Biden, Brennan, Mueller, Hillary working in concert. But this time they bring in a Tom Pickering who had all the accoutrements of a great ambassador, and I personally liked him. I wrote a nice blog about him, but I was totally disappointed because he besmirched his reputation, his integrity.
Incredible, Doc.
And he lied because he said this was just a problem of regional security officers. It had nothing to do
Sure,
with
and they've been caught lying everywhere. We got to go to break. We're going to come right back. You'll have the floor to break down where this goes now. I mean, this is incredible, folks. This is a meltdown of biblical proportions. This is real what you're seeing. Well, in that last 3-minute break, Dr. Steve Pieczenik, former head of psychological warfare operations for the State Department, trained and knows many of the people that are involved today, what he laid out, and I study it every day. I've got all the pieces. He's dead on, but he doesn't just see it like I do from the outside. He knows it. And everything he told us back 7 months ago, a few weeks after this happened, has now been proven. How will the system survive? I mean, I don't think the Republicans can just try to score political points here and say, oh, they screwed up. This is something that makes what Nixon did pale in significance. Dr. Pieczenik, can you repeat what you said during the break about what this signifies, where it's going, what needs to be done? And I said, maybe they're going to stage a new false flag. You said another Boston Massacre won't do it. So get into all of it right now, Dr. Steve Pieczenik.
All right. What this is far more serious than a Watergate. This is the Watergate on steroids for Obama. Obama must be stopped and impeached. There has to be a special prosecutor assigned and to investigate Obama's involvement in both this, Osama bin Laden, but in the Benghazi affair, the illegalities that were involved, as well as John Brennan, Dempsey, and Pickering and Hillary Clinton. It has to be an independent prosecutor. It cannot be a legislator. The legislators were co-opted, in particular Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, and others. I question the Esai as well because many had to know what was happening on. Secondly, they have to release the secret documents that were done on the investigation. They're not secret. They do not affect the national security. Thirdly, Dempsey has to be evaluated by a court of military justice for illegal activities committed against his own men and for the stand down. Every general who stood down and every Navy admiral who stood down has to be investigated under military tribunal law, as well as every special forces unit that was used illegally by military law and prosecutors. Everyone below the level of the general, at the colonel and major level, can and refuse any commands from the commander-in-chief. What I'm saying, in effect, is you can now disobey the commander-in-chief because he has committed a crime, and a crime against his own soldiers and American people. The last point is that all of these people have to be indicted, have to go to prison, otherwise our system will break apart. What is happening politically on the geopolitical level is that once again the CIA, Petraeus, unfortunately, and Hillary, and now William Burns of the State Department have decided to arm the Syrian opposition, which is really nothing more than Wahhabis from Saudi Arabia, from the Saudi princes who are totally corrupt and inefficient, who have been propped up by the CIA for over 30 years to take down Bashir Assad. They will not take down Bashir Assad. The Russians will help them. The Iranians will help them. The Chinese will help them. The war will continue. This was initiated by the CIA. This was initiated by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and King of Jordan. Israel attacked as it needed to attack, but really doesn't have a stake in the game other than to keep out of this and make sure that Hezbollah doesn't take armament. So we're heading into a potential third world war thanks to all of the disaster of an incompetent criminal president, an incompetent criminal vice president, incompetent John Brennan now is the CIA director, an incompetent chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an incompetent Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and questionable competency of John Kerry. And that means that the American public now has to say we had enough, and either we have an election, an immediate election, and a recall, and a massive impeachment request for the special prosecutor. This is way beyond Watergate. This is way beyond anything that Bill Clinton did, as much as I despise him. But this does indict the Secretary of State, the President of the United States, the Vice President, the director of the CIA now, John Brennan, and all of the men involved in the Special Forces unit that was an illegal unit, as well as all the military generals who stood down and the rear admirals must be evaluated by the commanding officers or officers below them in a military court of tribunal and tried for disregard of military arms procedure. And the State Department has to be stripped of Pat Kennedy, of the Secretary of State. Kerry has to be questioned. He's totally incompetent. Pat Kennedy must be thrown out. Eric Boswell must be questioned because he was in charge of the regional security officer. And there must be a release of the secret data.
And that's starting. That's starting. Dr. Pieczenik, that's starting. They're dragging them all in, as you know. Let me ask you this question, because you know all these people. You ran the State Department, ran major sections, ran the operations at Camp David. So let me ask you this question. If they were trying to embarrass Petraeus, it all blew back on them. They got Petraeus. That's all come out spying on him. There's this internal war over the power that the founders counted on to keep total tyranny from coming in, the separation of powers. It's saving us again. What do you expect to get done? I hear you saying what needs to be done. I agree with you. What do you expect them to do? Because they're not going to be able to put this back in the bottle of this genie. I believe they will stage false flags.
Well, they will keep stalling it and focus on totally irrelevant issues like more security, and you hear these legislators talk absolute nonsense. What has to happen is the public, your public and the public in general, Murdoch, the New York Times, and others have been very helpful in the Huffington Post to ask for immediate recalls of the legislators, including the President of the United States, like we did a recall of the governor, recall of the Vice President. This is the beginning of a new democracy, and this is a redefinition of what it means to be in the 21st century when our military cannot perform adequately, when they no longer serve our national security, and when the CIA is destructive to our own national security.
All right, but I know that, I know you've been a senior guy in the CFR. You say it's a debating club now, but in the Pentagon, in the CFR, in the different sectors of power, is the sense that this is the end of not just Obama, but this entire group? Because there is a desperation throughout the system that I've talked to people behind the scenes.
Yes.
They're all freaked out, too.
Not relevant. That's correct, Alice. In a way, what you're seeing is the more intelligent units that concentrate on geopolitical, like Stratford and others, are really moving towards your area, Austin, Texas, and further south where I'm located. The Northeast is no longer relevant. What you have is these think tanks with a lot of liberals and non-liberals, Rich Williamson. You have a whole bunch of guys who represented Mitt Romney. They didn't know what they were talking about. The Brookings Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, the Heritage Foundation. They're nothing but welfare institutions. They're nothing but institutions which allow people to live their life without having to have produced anything. The money has to be stopped.
So you got a bunch of spoiled brats pretending to be James Bond on power trips.
Well, it's not only that. There is no James Bond. CIA has never been effective in really taking out anybody. That's why I went on my own. I never used CIA. I was never part of the CIA. But often the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, backed me up. The CIA is a very incompetent organization, replete, unfortunately, with Irish Catholic individuals who follow a hierarchical system, who instead of following the Holy Father, follows the Holy President or whatever system tells them to do what they do. It's not an accident. They're Donlan, they're Brennan, they're Biden. They're all Irish names. McDermott, Rhodes. I mean, you really have a system that really attracts a certain type of individual that needs a hierarchy, that claims that they're serving national security, when in fact that they're destructive of national security. Our national security is really quite safe as long as we get rid of those who destroy it, which is the CIA. Our military has been very destructive. The military-industrial complex, including Halliburton, SAIC, L3 Communication, Northrop Grumman, Bell Helicopters, all useless. We don't need any of that now. We're getting into cyber war and cyber terrorism, which is probably the most important issue, but I don't need all these soldiers who are having sex scandals and can't fight and no longer are able to fight any enemies. We're creating the very enemies we don't need.
Yeah, let's explain what you say about the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned of. They go start wars and fund al-Qaeda so they then have something to fight later, and it helps their interest, but they're destroying the entire tree they're sitting in, the United States.
Correct. In the meantime, however, the good news is we have construction companies, we have individuals who understand that this is totally inappropriate for American society. In the 21st century, we're doing exactly what our founding fathers did, which is to have a revolution in a peaceful way through the Internet with people who I don't know about, anonymous people.
Sure. People that agree with each other, working in different ways. What's going to happen? What, from the insiders right now, where is all this going? How much trouble is Obama in?
The insiders have no idea of what they're doing. Basically, they're the gang who couldn't shoot straight. You know, we always assume that the FBI knows what they're doing. They don't. For 30 years, I couldn't get the FBI to rappel off the helicopters and do anything really in hostage negotiate. Yet they portray themselves in movies as if they know what they're doing. I told you Mueller was a disaster. He was brought in on 9/11. He had been compromised before that. He had been compromised after that. Osama bin Laden, he's now compromised Benghazi. I told you Hillary Clinton has been a disaster and a corrupt individual. She has to be taken out. She can no longer serve in our country. She can no longer be available. She is a criminal, as is Obama.
And she's using the blackmail, right? That's why she's so powerful, is doesn't she have the biggest files?
Well, she has the biggest files, but the bottom line is if you look at the Obama administration, they're nothing more than retread Clinton people who were disasters, and they were retread Carter individuals. None of these guys are originals who came out of anywhere. We do have very talented individuals. I would say I would do what Eisenhower, George Marshall did, and George Marshall did, and I would fire the first 600 generals, admirals, and Air Force generals because they're totally useless. We don't have a war, and I would start to promote our captains and majors and force them to say, okay, enough is enough. Either you stay in the military or you get rid of your superiors.
By the way, what you mentioned is true. They've never done this.
600 generals and all of these incompetents. Easily we could get rid of Panetta, who should have been indicted. Easily we could have gotten rid of Hillary Clinton, and we could have gotten, now Tom Pickering has to be evaluated, Pat Kennedy should be fired, Eric Boswell should be investigated.
Sure.
And every one of the so-called securitized or information that was classified has to be opened up by an independent committee. I do not trust Feinstein. I do not trust Pelosi. I do not trust any of them. It has to be an independent process.
All right, let me ask you a question as a psychiatrist, and not just a quack one, but somebody that's done famous negotiations, co-written books with Tom Clancy. I just throw that out. Not for any narcissism for you, but for listeners who know who was on the air if they just tuned in, Pieczenik.com. Again, I'm Alex Jones of Infowars.com if you just tuned in. Everything you're saying I know to be true from deep research of it. The general public is not, is working too hard to have all the details here. But here's my question for you. When I look at Pelosi and I look at Hillary and I look at the FBI and CIA people they've had follow me and at Bilderberg, they are like little kids talking into their, suit jacket. Like you could see like a little kid in a Batman outfit. They're imagining they're superheroes. I go to movies and see bureaucrats and cops watching Olympus Has Fallen, total fantasy, watching Iron Man. The cops and people in the audience think it's real. It's like a nation of children. Where does this go with this Hollywood delusion with, like you said, FBI that can't, rappel off helicopters? And they're buying billions of rounds of ammo, armored vehicles, openly training for war with the American people. They can't even hold Baghdad. They can't control Afghanistan, but they really think they're going to start a civil war. I talk to good FBI people, federal marshals. I get the training manuals. We're the ones that break them. And it says all the Christians are terrorists. All the veterans are evil. I mean, it's like cartoonish, like something Dr. Evil in a comedy would be talking like. You've got the military saying people can't pray, to Jesus. I mean, it's like we've become the Soviet Union, but they haven't taken over. They're just self-destructing, running around like lunatics. So as a psychiatrist, here's my rant. As a psychiatrist, have they gone insane like Nero? Because I know they're competent in their evil, but I mean, how crazy are they?
It's not relevant to me. As a psychiatrist, you have to remember two things. One, I did assassination. Two, I incarcerated those who were the criminally insane. So either way, it doesn't matter to me whether they're evil or not. Once they've committed the act of terror or criminal, they either go to prison or they're executed. It's quite simple. What you need is a leader who understands that, is not afraid, works within that Constitution because they have been criminally indicted. As long as you have lawyers and legislators, you're going to have nothing but babble and psychobabble. The issue now as a psychiatrist is very simple. From my point of view, I've been used in 5 administrations to take out leaders, to take out systems without having to do as much as the military does because they're ineffective, without using the CIA, but you can take them out. If the people want somebody like me to lead them and I go forth, I mean, they pick somebody, but they have to have somebody who's not beholden to anyone. They have to have somebody who understands the system, is willing to take it down very rapidly and start to fire people the way Marshall did, the way Eisenhower did, and they have to pick people who understand that this is not an issue of whether they're sick or not sick. It's irrelevant to us now. We have a revolution. The revolution is clear. You have people who are totally incompetent, they're totally criminal. Either we do something about it, they get indicted, or they get executed. There's not very much to say more than that, because otherwise we're going to see them commit another act and continuously commit what we call sociopathic acts until you said correctly they get caught. The only way to stop them is to literally stop them. That's what I believe. That's what I've done in 5 administrations, and that's why I don't belong to any one of these parties or any one of the affiliations.
Last week
I fired, and I indicted, and I imprisoned, and I did what I had to do. That's what America has to do now. It's very simple.
Sure, I want to understand their mindset on average so that I can understand, but I understand it's a collection of different groups.
Their mindset, I could call them criminally and sociopath. It doesn't really matter. They don't really care. They just continue on. I mean, Esai started by breaking into cars and built up a security company, Esai, and now he's an investigator. I mean, a criminal now investigates criminals. I mean, where they began and where they started is not relevant to me. It's the actions that they've committed. You and I know since the beginning of time in Osama bin Laden, Bush Jr. has never been punished. Never been punished. His father goes out and explains it, and finally his mother says, no more Bushes. Well, that's not enough. Bush has to be held accountable, Cheney, more than just the story, more than allowing them to get on TV. Either he goes under prosecution, criminal, or...
All right. We don't need to go there. Listen, here's my issue. I talk to active duty military people as you do, and they tell me half the people, a couple of years ago it was like 35%. Now half the people in the military are totally awake. They're listening to this show. I don't say that as it actually, I don't like that. It's kind of scary that nobody else has stood up, and that we're one of the biggest oppositions to this. I just want common sense in a future for my children. But let's take Alex Jones and Steve Pieczenik out of the equation. Okay, what do you expect things to do, places... what do you expect to unfold now is what I'm trying to get at, because I don't think they're probably going to do anything to Obama, even though he's been caught with his pants completely down. But then all that does is reaffirm the loss of confidence, and then I expect them to stage an even bigger grouping of Boston bombings to then try to put martial law in. They won't call it martial law, and I think that will even make them lose even more credibility.
Well, let me be very blunt. I mean, you know, I've been warned of this repeatedly. There's not an accident that while Obama's been in the presidency, he's lauded and people have lauded the story of Abraham Lincoln, another tyrant from my point of view, who, of course, had gotten rid of habeas corpus and had indicted many of his own people and then had an aggression against the South for reasons that he claimed were the freedom of slavery, but that wasn't the case. It was to retain the republic. You either indict Obama, he goes to prison, or you execute him. There are not many alternatives. Now, either our military will stand up as a military, it won't. Most of the time, I'm very unimpressed by our generals, our colonels, and those who've come to the top. Now I'm asking the majors, the captains, and the lieutenants, if you stay in the military, you're going to decide what you're going to have to do in the military. That means a junta, and that means you're going to have to do it in an effective way. I am asking for treason. Treason in the time. Yeah,
I want to be specific. Hold on, I didn't know you were going to go there. Isn't Obama just a puppet? I wish no harm upon him.
He's not just a puppet. Puppets are as dangerous as anybody else. The puppet talks while the master, whether it's Brennan or the military-industrial complex, is not relevant. If there's to be a military and there's to follow the command and control and their allegiance to the country, then they have to act accordingly. Dempsey did not. Mullen did not. Ryder did not. Jones did not. I mean, I can go through every Marine Corps. Every one of these generals were brought into the military when they were born in the 70s. None of them really saw combat other than the ones that they created. So you have a military that's dysfunctional, bloated, and ineffective. You have a CIA dysfunctional, bloated, and ineffective.
Yeah, well, let me say this. The last thing I want is anything to happen to Obama outside of courts, because that'll turn him into some type of hero. And what's incredible is you're who you say you are. Co-write books with Tom Clancy, ran black ops all over the world. You know, mainstream news says you assassinated world leaders, and you're on my show saying this. And I mean, are you ready for the Secret Service to come after you?
Secret Service has been after me for a long time. The Secret Service is the most dysfunctional unit I've ever seen. All they do is protect one man, and they protect other presidents. They have no service whatsoever to the United States people. They do not protect them. They make believe that they're monitoring.
No, I know, but you've talked about this stuff before on air. Why aren't they coming after you?
Billions of dollars.
What?
Nothing more than to protect one man who's incompetent. And the Secret Service, quite frankly, is collusive. There's no reason for a major Secret Service. When you had Truman leaving, he left. When you had Eisenhower leaving, he didn't have an entourage. This was an absolute creation of their own dimension and their own narcissism.
Sure, it's like turning the Chinese emperors into slaves with all the pomp and circumstance, more of the legalist stuff. But look, I'm trying to understand this because I mean, I'm not saying, don't you want to clarify what you said or walk that back? Because I mean,
I don't want to clarify. It's very simple. If I am asked to do what I was asked to do in 5 administrations, to take out Aldo Moro, to take out Noriega, to take out others, why would I not want also to take out the very people who've committed the crimes against our own government? That's not an act of treason when you have tyranny, and they've been proven.
So I hear you. This is just completely over the top.
I'll go to jail. But if I'm the one to go to jail, then who else will join me? This is a cry for freedom. This is not some right-wing nut. I said this about Osama bin Laden. I said it about 9/11. I said it about Joe Bush Jr. I said it about Cheney. How many times can I repeat it? You don't take a sociopath and you don't let him go. You just incarcerate him, indict him, or execute him. It's not complicated, but you don't listen to his words. And we have a bunch of sociopaths. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Bush Jr. You have Obama. You have Biden. These are all sociopaths. who are rewarded by us, and they're enforced by their own little group called the Secret Service, and a whole group of other sociopaths who are criminal called the CIA, who are total disasters. You have generals who have allegiance to their pension and not to their country, and they create wars that they can't even win. Iraq,
all right,
Afghanistan,
man, I tell you, this is
Yemen, Somalia.
This is an insane time to be alive, and I just wish.
It's not insane. It's really it's what Thomas Jefferson said, my friend.
No, I hear you. You got a lot of cojones.
Must fight for its own democracy. That's what we're doing.
All right.
These guys
I hope for a peaceful solution.
The empire's on.
Been completely blindsided today. Dr. Steve Pieczenik has produced major Hollywood movies. He's co-written books with Tom Clancy, written his own bestsellers. He was the main psychiatrist negotiator for the Camp David Accords. He has been involved in black ops all over the world, one of the founders of Delta Force. And he's on my show, talking about all this. And look, it's not that I'm afraid of repercussions, because I'm a guy that's always calling for nonviolence, because I believe in ideas, and exposing their lies will make them lose credibility. And we're going to go back to Dr. Pieczenik. Let me have the last word on this, but I'll tell you where I stand. The American people have let corruption take over. We have been too passive. We have worshipped bureaucracy. We have worshipped the red carpets of all these people. The top generals, it's been widely reported, are on beautiful jets with secretaries sex servicing them with, walnut and maple wood paneling and champagne. And then the troops are on C-130s with fleas and flies and ticks defecating in buckets with stuff running down the hallways. And I've talked to family that's in the military, and they're still gung-ho, but they're like, oh, yeah, everything's collapsing, but we can do it. 5, 6, 7 tours. You never made somebody serve over one tour. I mean, just why are they committing suicide? You're using them like, 500,000 miles on a pair of tires that are supposed to go 100,000. They know what they're doing. There is a crazy disconnect going on. And the globalists want a civil war in this country. They want to get one started because they can't win the Velvet Revolution. I know that Adam Kokesh isn't a globalist operative, but he wants armed marches on D.C. He has a right to do it, to educate about the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court's ruled they can do it, but the police chief says they can't. D.C. Heller. I understand he has a right. I don't think he's a bad guy. I admire his courage, but my gut says it's bad. And as for Pieczenik, Dr. Steve Pieczenik here with us, I get him on about Benghazi because he accurately said what happened 7 months ago, a few weeks after it happened. And then he goes off into this whole other area that, Doc, I got to say something. I know you've been a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, the whole 9 yards, and I would have to think that you believe you're protected by something to be able to talk like that on air. But even if I believed what you're saying, obviously I wouldn't say it, but I don't believe what you're saying. I do not believe a military coup in this country is the way to go because the bureaucracy is still all there. I mean, what are you saying on the airwaves here?
What I'm saying is basically you've already had a military coup when every one of the congressmen and senators, you just saw Portman, Senator Portman, the so great spokesman for Mitt Romney, in other words, who's a Republican fiscal, say, oh, no, I need M1 Abram tanks, when in fact the Army said, we don't need it. And he said, no, he lied. We need it for national security. And the Army said, no. What's happening is every legislator, every senator has been taken hostage by the military-industrial complex. That means the tank, the PETA factories. What has happened is they are already under a military-industrial coup already. What I'm saying is our military is dysfunctional. They are no longer functional. Our generals have no longer been in an area of combat for national security. They've created the wars they've created. It's time for them to be judged,
all right,
indicted, and executed.
Okay, no more of that. Listen.
Now, listen, wait a minute. It's not something that I'm just out of right field. I ran the criminally insane ward. I had the same types of generals there who were indicted for mass murders. I had the same types of legislators who were indicted for all kinds of criminal activities. This is not unique. A physician has two obligations: to heal and to execute if necessary if the patient is moribund or you have cancer. What we have now is the cancer in the system. The cancer in the system is growing to such an extent that words are not doing anything. So you have somebody like the DCM who comes out and blows the whistle, and I admire him. You have our regional security officer who admires them. Then I have somebody like Issei saying, oh, that's very nice, and a lot of legislators who just have blabber. Unless you indict your president, unless you indict and have an investigation, it doesn't have to be with wars and weapons.
No, I get it. We need to have a special prosecutor.
Clinton for fellatio. You certainly can indict Obama for military miscreant behavior, for inappropriate and command and control, for criminal activities against the United States, and you can do that for Biden, you can do that for the White House, you can do that for everyone.
But how do you... Sure. Let me stop you for a minute. There you go. I mean, we do what we did with Nixon. That's the way this needs to go. My question to you is, they are creating a secret army, the billions of bullets, the armored vehicles, the training for war with us. So I'm trying to stop all this before it goes to that.
Well, it's not going to go to that because, number one, this army didn't even function well in Iraq in the wars they created. They didn't function well in Afghanistan. What is happening now, the real burden goes to those below the generals. That's why they dress the captains and the lieutenants who say, do you want to remain in the army? Clean out your army, clean out your navy, clean out your air force. The veterans, 1 million, 40% of who have PTSD and 40% who have suicide rates. If you want to do something with it, then you're going to have to deal with the VA that's ineffectual, General Shinseki, who I've asked for the retirement repeatedly, and for the fact that you will not get the treatment. You have 1 million veterans who have to do something. In 1927, 1 million veterans walked on in Washington, and it was General MacArthur who had to stop it. But unless you go to the streets, unless you go to the Internet, unless anonymous people do what they have to do, this system will not break down just by little spurts of discussion and a little spurt of questioning. It has to be exactly what I do. A physician examines, cures, or decides, you terminate. That's exactly what we do. We apportion health care. Whether it sounds obscene or Mengele, that's not even relevant. We do that all the time. Ask any physician in the emergency room. He will evaluate what's out there. The people he can treat, he can treat. Those he can't will have to wait, and those who've committed the crimes or whatever will rarely get treated. Now we've come into a system that is so sick that unless you prosecute them, indict them with an investigator that's totally independent of the system, that doesn't get a bonus, doesn't get paid, is not part of the military like Dempsey, is not part Pickering, who belongs to Boeing and to various other organizations of the Council on Foreign Relations, or Pat Kennedy, who's paid by the State Department, or Eric Boswell, who's still being paid by the State Department, or Dempsey, who has his pension and double dip. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Unless you get to the core of the money and take away their money and then strip them down into an investigative procedure, nothing will happen. If nothing then happens, then the American public deserves what it has called for. What I say is revolution. Revolution, I said it 11 years ago when 9/11 happened. Revolution in any way you want, the form that you take. But Thomas Jefferson said it, Adams said it, George Washington said it. He warned us repeatedly of people like Obama, Clinton, Bush Jr. They are constant sociopaths who will self-aggrandize. Whatever they are as a psychiatrist is not relevant to me. What they do and damage to our veterans, to our people who have no jobs, to the wars and killing of 380,000 innocent Iraqi, Afghani, Pakistanis, and create civil wars in Iraq and shift it to the Shiites with Iran and then create another war where they go gung-ho in the CIA. That is criminal activity. You have to pay for that. You go.
It really is criminal activity. Well, the reason I bring up this...
very complicated.
Sure. The reason I bring up the psychology...
That, I will be happy to explain it
again. Sure. Doc, can you hear me? I mean, my point is they are going crazy. I mean, they're publicly funding Al-Qaeda while saying give our rights up because of Al-Qaeda. What will happen if the American people don't have a restoration of the republic and try to turn things around? What will happen? They will just steal everything until everything collapses. They're devaluing the dollar. They are insane. I understand you're desperate. I understand you're putting yourself out on a limb saying this. I mean, I know you're a real guy who's done a lot of things and, you know, basically has a lot of will. My only issue is I think we're winning in the info war, and I think if things just go a little bit further down the line without having a shooting war, we're going to win this thing. Now, if a shooting war starts...
I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying necessarily a shooting war. I'm just saying that a war of action. A war of action doesn't have to be a shooting war. For example, Murdoch and Fox News did a great job in Benghazi. The New York Times, Jill Abramson, did a very great job on Sandy Hook. Huffington Post did a great job on revealing very others. You've done a phenomenal job. It's got to keep going on. The issue here is that you don't have a body of legislative individuals who can be trusted. Feinstein cannot be trusted. Pelosi cannot be trusted. Max Baucus. You can't trust the people who are overseeing the criminals.
Well, they're weird. They're weird people.
So that has to have immediate action. Whether you incarcerate them and you assign a special prosecutor designated by the people or the governors, that's fine by me. But the question is, the system has to change much more rapidly than our going on the radio for 11 years and warning people. This has been going on repeatedly. The criminals
and it's clearly getting worse. All right, Dr. Pieczenik.
I'm not worried about what happens to me. I'm not desperate at all. I'm as calm and cool collected as I was the day when I said to you, 9/11 was a standout. It was Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Steve Hadley, Sandy Berger on rendition. I know them all. This is not something that I was totally surprised. This was not something, but nothing was done. Then they all got frightened that I might take them out. No, I haven't taken them out. Can I take them out? Yes. Does the intelligence community know I can take them out? Yes. Are they afraid of me? Yes. Am I afraid of them? No. Is this a stand down? Yes. Am I the only American who can say this? No. But every American is afraid to state, this is what I am. I'm an American citizen, and I'm sick of what's going on. That's all they have to say. The governors are powerful. You've got Southern governors like Rick Perry. You've got Scott Perry. You've got in Florida. You've got Rick Scott in Florida. You've got South Carolina. You got North Carolina. You got Georgia. The power has shifted geopolitically from the north. And I say the think tanks and the counts on front, they're all dead. They're just they're the dead. They're the basically demented individuals who have nothing else to say, and they still want to stay alive. They're being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have Stroke Taub running the Brookings Institute, who was the former Deputy Secretary of State and the roommate of Clinton, and he's running an institute totally useless.
Well, no, they hate America. They hate free market. He's an admitted communist.
By the U.S. government. You've got L3 Communications, totally useless. You've got Boeing. You got Northrop Grumman, all of whom immediately went from a dysfunctional system into cybersecurity and got paid for nonsensical work and pieces of work that I look at and I say are not even worthy. So unless the people stand forth and they want to do it through the legal process,
no, I hear you. It's a disaster. Pieczenik, Doc, we're out of time. We're out of time. Listen, I want to thank you for coming on. And we'll hopefully try to talk to you again soon and see what happens with these statements you've made on air.
Well, it's going to blow out, Alex. It'll blow out more.
So just expect everything to get even crazier. All right, Dr. Pieczenik, thank you very much. I've got some closing comments on this. I've been on air 3 hours and 46 minutes. I got a little bit tired towards the end of the show, and I get hit by something like this. I'm ready for a nap. I mean, I wanted to talk about Benghazi. I want to bring these people down with their crimes. And Pieczenik, it's just, my life is too bizarre. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you right now. This is way over my head, but it's way over everybody else's head. We're all just humans, and this is crazy land. The globalists are crazy, and the only way to respond to crazy is crazy. I mean, I get that, but I just can't handle it anymore. By the way, I'm not on air tomorrow. I'll be calling in on the show. I'll spend some time with family. We've got Holland van de Nieuwenhof coming in. He always does a great job. And we're going to have Jakari Jackson and David Knight in here with them. And I'll be calling in at noon on the show. I'm just spending some time with my parents for Mother's Day with my kids. Only way I can spend time with my kids, because I end up working 18 hours a day, is to take off a day here and there. But I'll be back Sunday live, 4 to 6 o'clock. There's InfoWars Nightly News tonight. White House rethinking plan to arm Syrian rebels. Wait a minute, didn't they do that already? It's just what they put out to create the illusion that they haven't been arming them all along. That's just designed to get to a public that doesn't pay attention. Will you guys punch up Infowars.com for me? Thanks. Breaking 3D printable gun ordered shut down by the government. That is big breaking news. We have the letter. We broke it. Infowars.com. Clinton Rice presented awards for public service on the same day as Benghazi hearing. Just there's no end to these nuts, man. They love awards. It's like total, what do you call it, narcissism world. Boston top cop warns against police state. I mean, that is really a joke. Pot calling the kettle black. Al-Qaeda now in control of CIA's covert war in Syria. Australian activists defeat spy cameras in landmark case. Very important article. Israel rescues al-Qaeda terrorists from Syria. That's in the Israeli papers. That they go get the jihadis. They're going across the border, and they got field hospitals set up taking care of al-Qaeda. I mean, we have entered the 9th dimension here. It just goes on and on. That's just some of the news up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Here's some of the news over at Drudge. Obama seeks to make Cruz the face of the GOP opposition. They're scared of Cruz being a libertarian Ron Paul type. So they act like they're not scared and go, better not be like that or we'll beat you. Dems long to turn Lone Star State blue. Obama is in Austin right now. We're on the radio right now while Pieczenik was saying all that stuff. I mean, this is just complete bizarro world. President's second trip to Texas in 2 weeks. Rick Perry. He's come to the right place to tout economic growth. Texas ranks 18th in unemployment. Illinois ranks 50th. Governor will be waiting on tarmac. I think Obama's already landed, hadn't he? He's going to fly a stupid helicopter around. Texas cheerleader after winning Bible lawsuit. I knew that God was going to work it out, so that's part of that. All hat, no cattle. There's Obama. Absolutely, that's a good saying. Big Sis. Bill gives Big Sis virtually unlimited sole, reviewable. That's what they're doing with Obamacare, all this, transfer dictatorial power, discretion to ICE. Council warns Congress. I mean, it's just a total takeover. Bill Gates paid $330 million for a Da Vinci manuscript. And it just goes on and on. Intelligence report noted possibility of Boston attack. Gee, think so? FBI under fire. Oh, really? Why do you think? So they didn't know him. Of course they knew him. And it just goes on and on. Hillary accepts public service award. Again, on day of Benghazi, I already mentioned that. American stabbed outside embassy in Cairo. Russian showcases military pomp for Victory Day. It just goes on and on. That celebrates the end of World War II or the victory over the Nazis. Detroit's in worse shape than they even thought previously. Well, I thought government would fix it. That's just some of the news. And there's a bunch of key Second Amendment videos we've got posted up on Infowars.com and Infowars Nightly News tonight, 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. If you're not a PrisonPlanet.tv membership, this show is Mach 50 on Hair on Fire. If you're not supporting us, you're not supporting the fight for liberty. So fund the InfoWar today. Become a PrisonPlanet.tv member.